I'm John Wells. I'm a senior advisor here for this Lunar New Year's Eve virtual festive gathering. And to give you an idea just how festive it is, each resident who registered for this program received a gift bag containing oranges, hard candy, a Tsingtao beer, and most importantly, a copy of the Pocket Chinese Almanac for 2021, whose authors I'll introduce shortly. Apologies to our alumni friends who are joining us. Hopefully you're having the beverage of your choice at home. Just some housekeeping rules. Please identify yourselves, reveal yourselves if you want to turn your cameras on. Write your name, where you are, send any questions you might have, which we'll try to answer during the Q&A. So on this Lunar New Year's Eve, we're ushering in the year of the metal ox. And to do so, no one should be without the Pocket Chinese Almanac, first published 12 years ago by Joanna C. She's an iHouse alumna, a translator and interpreter, which doesn't begin to describe all she does. And her husband, Ken Smith, who writes about Asian culture for the Financial Times and other publications. Full disclosure, I've known Joanna since she was an iHouse resident, where she reminds me she was a performing arts fellow and a Sunday supper fellow, and many other things. She and Ken are neighbors and very good friends. Happy aspect of the pandemic for me has been the fact that Joanna and Ken, who are usually flying back and forth between New York, the West Coast, China, and Europe, have been in residence in New York for a year, which I think constitutes a record for them. Unhappily for my waistline, Joanna has taken up baking with a passion this year, and I have been the all too frequent recipient of her culinary creation. So happily for us, they have joined us during what's a really busy time for them to give us a tailored version of their almanac presentation. Joanna and Ken, give us some background on the almanac. And turn on your microphone. Or Asia, turn on their microphone.
Let's do that.
Okay, now we are unmuted.
Yeah.
There are many different ways to approach that, because my story is different from Joanna's story, and is different from Alice Meng's story from the Museum of Chinese America, which kind of started it all for us in a way. But they all sort of converge on some major points. And we had been very fascinated with the almanac for a couple of years before MoCA launched and before we created our version. And in part because I was fascinated with this document that the same person in Flushing who booked my ticket, my air tickets, was reading the same book that Joanna's mother was reading in Hong Kong. And I found that, very interesting that global connection existed among the Chinese diaspora.
Actually, what happened is that there was one day in which we were calling our travel agent in Flushing, and we were saying, clearly there are all these fluctuations in prices, so we wanted to know the cheapest day, so it could be a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, right? And so suddenly Ken asked, which is a better day?
What's a better day to travel, Thursday or Saturday? Thinking there might be a price break.
Both myself and the travel agent yelled and said, Thursday! And it turns out that we were actually looking at the almanac. It wasn't looking even at prices. We were actually looking at a day that is good for starting a long journey. So that's sort of how Ken got all excited about it. But then came sometime, I don't know, a while ago when we got married. That was actually an interesting thing. So, being very, very Western, American guy from Ohio, and me, I was born in Hong Kong, but I've lived in New York for, by that time, was already more than 20 years. What are we going to do and how are we going to pick our wedding date? And then we thought, that's it. We're just going to consult the big almanac. And this is how big it is.
And this was a bonding moment for Joanna and her mom, I have to say. And to go back into what is a document that stretches back thousands of years.
Now printed, but now it's printed.
Yeah, to be checking all of this online was quite an interesting thing. It's lived and become very modern in a lot of ways. And so we were quite publicly fascinated with this. Joanna would list good for and bad for days on her Facebook every Monday, and for the week. And when the Museum of Chinese America opened their current home, we were in talks with them, and they wanted to launch a donor gift. And so we thought, what would happen if we turned the big red book into a little red book? And so first of all, it makes it easier for, to put up, above the place setting. And they loved it. And they went over very, very well. And
that was December of 2009.
so basically 12 years ago. And so when the next year they came back to us and said, well, do you have any more of those little red books? I said, well, it changes every year. And they came up, well, yeah, do you have those little red books? And I realized that they wanted us to do an entirely new book in about a week and a half. And we did, because most of the work had been done the year before. So we updated it, got it out, got it to them, and it's become now a 12-year tradition.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what are some connections between the big red book and the little red book? Obviously, you can't fit all of one into the other.
The important stuff. The almanac, I mean, to really explain it, it's kind of like the Farmer's Almanac in that many of the articles appear from year to year. A lot of it doesn't change, but what does change is obviously the days, months, and year. It will lay out very differently on the page, and also the predictions, the astrological ideas of what is good and bad for each day, how the heavenly bodies will align with the earthly bodies, ideally, and what you should do and what you should not do has been there, connected with the Chinese calendar since the beginning, since before they even started having any sort of prediction, before the imperial calendar got to the public, basically. And so that has always been part of this tradition. And even though today the geomancers go through the same type of permutations and algorithms to find what is good and bad each day, but the interpretation on the ground is very modern and has nothing to do often with what the agrarian society was like back thousands of years ago. So it's become very much a part of Chinese culture, who we are, what, as a Chinese person, where we come from, basically, the same way that people look at other documents and in other cultures.
I mean, the thing is, think of other Asian cultures too, because the Koreans also have that. Indians also have that. I mean, this is the idea of how do we somehow find that harmony or find that rhythm, that whatever it is, sky, moon, stars, and how that actually all put together. And what is really fun about the Chinese almanac is that for centuries, I mean, this has been a way of telling people what are the good days for good beginnings, such as starting your own business, very important. We actually picked the date to start our business really according to the calendar. Not only that, weddings, engagements. And then you have things such as, signing contracts. Oh, that's important. And then we have a lot of architect friends because there's a lot to do with building, because after all, think of agrarian life, which is clearly how it all began. So you have planting, transplanting. You have then building houses, raising beams, raising the roofs and so on. That is actual communal type of activity, because a number of people in the village or in the clan has to actually stop whatever they are doing to join together to actually build a house, because you cannot do it just one person. So all this actually is a way of creating rhythm for living, for village life. And the interesting part is now, for the modern reader, what do we take? So it's interesting. There's Southern China, as you can imagine, is very, very close to all the fishing villages and so on. So fishing is major. So they have a very important activity called making fishing nets. Now, how do you interpret it from the sort of old agrarian way, which is, you make your fishing net because it might be a windy or rainy day. You cannot really go out and fish. So you might as well, get yourself prepared, right? So what do we do now with the modern reader, and what does Ken consider making fishing net for him who doesn't fish?
Well, basically, you stay home and you repair your fishing nets is when you delete all unwanted emails and take care of everything that is basically house cleaning to prepare yourself for when you go back on the water. And so all of this works in, and it comes down to a point where people ask us, do people really believe this in Hong Kong? And it's not even whether they really believe it. It is just a document that quite often regulates what goes on there. If you find a good day for a haircut, you'd better make your appointment. If you see a good day for breaking ground, odds are there are going to be construction sites on your path, so you better be prepared and leave a little bit early. So these things really, really happen as a matter of course, and I'm sure that they do in Taiwan too. The irony is that the most modern of these cities in the 80s, 90s, and into 2000, those were the ones who followed the almanac closer than any other culture.
Interesting. So how much is the almanac used nowadays in China and elsewhere?
Well, the wedding industry,
The wedding
definitely.
industry relies on that. And then now we can talk about the sort of the Chinese and the Asian, you call it the immigrant communities. Immigrant communities everywhere actually use it. And I think that had to do with many things, had to do with how people relate to their parents' generation and grandparents' generation, what the belief systems were. And I find that it is really great because we have friends in Amsterdam who read the same book that other people in Sydney read. And then comes a problem. So for example, the change of seasons, as in our spring, is actually autumn or fall for Sydney. So our winter now in New York is actually middle of summer in Auckland, in New Zealand, right? So the thing is, there really is this sort of very strange topsy-turvy life or topsy-turvy way of looking at things. But regardless, is that people still believe in, if it's a good day for a wedding, it's universal. I know Ken always wanted to know whether the Charles and Diana wedding date, if we can actually go back to 1981, whether it was a good day or not.
One of the things that we would love to do, and when we go back and actually can look at the records in Hong Kong, we want to go back and say, great moments in history. What did the almanac say? 9/11, bad day to travel. We just go back and check this out.
Yes, well, and speaking of which, last year being a banner year for so many of us, how did the almanac come out on that?
Well, okay, we have to say that in the old days, there was a history of emperors whose geomancers missed out on a bad eclipse or an earthquake. And of course, that indicated to the country that, the emperor had lost the mandate of heaven. And so it was pretty vulnerable situation for the person there. And of course, particularly vulnerable for the geomancers who might have missed that.
Known as Geomancer, lost head.
Yes.
Boom, head's gone.
In our case, we're a little more lenient, but last year, our geomancer just gave us a very, very strange reading. And in fact, he was quite alarmed by this.
He said a number of things. One is do not, okay, he's talking about 2020, okay? So this is all history now, but still it's good for us to learn from history. So the first one is that do not try and convince others to change their minds. 2020, okay? Second one is find a safe place and hide there. And he said that in late 2019. And Ken and I just looked at him and said, what do you mean? And he said he didn't know.
Well, and basically he said one other thing that didn't register at the time, which was the first half of the year of 2020 will be consumed worldwide by something. And I said, well, what do you mean? I mean, are you talking about a man-made situation? Are you talking about a political situation or a natural disaster? And he couldn't say. He said, I have no idea. I've never seen this before. It's something, if there is one thing that will affect the entire world and it will throw the world into chaos. And it will start to get better at the end of 2020.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Who is that? You said the Geomancer?
Yes, he's the man who actually
Does all the calculations.
gives us these readings.
And is he the Geomancer for the world? In other words, if the same person is reading,
Well,
For us, he is. There are many geomancers, and clearly this is a secret tradition or secret knowledge or secret wisdom of how to actually calculate the sun, stars, and moons.
so,
Okay.
but how is someone in Flushing reading the same thing someone in Shanghai is reading, unless it's the
It's published in a book.
Okay, we'll go back. We have a little history here because I realize we sort of jumped over this, and it is also detailed a little bit in the book in the front matter. But basically, the almanac is connected very deeply and historically with the imperial calendar. The emperor would have his mathematicians and astronomers and astrologers, there wasn't much difference back then, to chart out the paths of the heavens and to basically create the calendar, similar to what we do, but theirs is a lunar solar calendar as opposed to ours, which is a solar lunar calendar. So they came up with the same ideas, breaking down into days, weeks, months. But from there, it takes on a very metaphysical characteristic because the patterns, the heavenly patterns are supposed to align in many ways with the earthly patterns. And so ideally for us to be in line with the universe, we have to follow certain behavior or at least not do certain things when we're not supposed to do, or else we would probably not have optimal results. And so this was originally all for the emperor. And the public was forbidden to know this. However, there turned out to be a lot of rogue geomancers out there because yes, it's a secret skill today, but it's not so secret. It's just that you need a very traditional style of mathematics that was practiced in China that is not practiced today outside of this discipline.
Ancient mathematics, okay? So that's what it was. And so basically it was the imperial calendar only used by the emperor, but then other people realized that there is clearly an interest in the public to want to know about all these dates, what is good, what is bad. And so there came the piracy industry, as in people basically pirated whatever it is and published it as almanacs and to sell them.
But is there just one almanac? And are there competing
There,
almanacs there?
well, yes, and there has always been competing versions. And
One says it's a great day to have rituals. The other says don't do any rituals today.
absolutely.
Exactly.
So you would have that, and you'd have people. There were copies that would be totally spurious. There would be copies that would be, in fact, directly pirated from the real version, and it was out there.
Real version.
Yeah, exactly. But from the actual imperial calendar,
Okay.
and it was funny because they would have in the imperial calendar, copied punishable by decapitation, and so it's kind of like if you ever
See,
bought
don't copy any. I know.
let's
Just buy some more instead of copying them.
if you
Okay.
ever bought a pirate DVD in China, they all just have the FBI warning, right? Copied in right away. It was just like that. All the pirate editions had, threat, by decapitation. And so yes, it was all there. So I love the fact that the history of mass publishing in China is actually the history of mass piracy in China. So this continued for a long time until the government finally just got out of, and they published their official version. And then they finally got out of the publication business and just let the publishing industry take over. And by that time, this was in the Qing dynasty, and there was a lot, they had a lot to worry about in the Qing dynasty without worrying about this.
Yeah, and what happened with why actually, I was born in Hong Kong, so those of you who know Hong Kong was British, but what happened, it happened with the almanac industry, as in the publishing of the almanac. Hong Kong became the center because China used to be, but then during the Cultural Revolution, everything stopped. So a lot of the younger, well, at that point, a lot of the not quite established geomancers, not quite established almanac printers suddenly basically took off from the late 1960s onward. And then that, remember, was also that time when there was huge communities and diasporas and immigrants and immigration patterns of that time. So suddenly this very sort of down to earth, very sort of grounded type of popular belief system then became much more popular, and actually then started entering all these other different territories outside of China or even Asia. And the thing is, remember that, for example, Thailand has a lot of people of Chinese descent. So Thailand has always had their own version of the almanac, okay? Vietnamese, Vietnam, same thing. Also remember, Lunar New Year, as in tomorrow, it's not just Chinese. I mean, everybody's celebrating it. I mean, we have Tet in Vietnam and all the Vietnamese immigrant communities. In Korea, they are all making rice cakes. I tell you, in Korea, they're all making rice cakes now.
Yes, Koreans' rice cakes are so much worse than Canada.
What about turnip cakes?
Oops, sorry.
We had some of that today.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I thought I was on mute.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I'm making spring rolls right now, by the way. So I don't
We're
want to
making noodles.
spring rolls.
Ah, very good.
Spring rolls.
Sorry, and the word geomancer, what's the etymology there?
Well, basically, it's a person who looks at the heavenly bodies and relates them
And
to
the earthly.
and the earthly bodies.
Yeah, heaven and earth.
And really, it comes down to and Feng Shui is very much connected to this in a practical terminology and practical usage, and other sort of related fields. Heaven, earth, mankind is the general breakdown, and heavens are the geomancer's deal. The Feng Shui exists on earth, and then by the time it gets to mankind and what we're supposed to do ourselves, what kind of our actions, that fits the full pattern.
Huh.
So as we said, now there are a lot of people who do geomancy. If you are going to be getting married, or your kids are going to be getting married, you are going to want a good wedding consultant, and that would be the geomancer, who goes through and finds the right day for everyone
Everything.
involved,
Yeah.
and then work the calendar backwards. And so you reverse engineer the entire thing on everybody doing everything on precisely the right time.
Because you have the engagements, you have the giving of the gifts and all that. So that you can read in the book. Those of you who have the book, just read up, because I think we very much explained it in the back of the book too. And also remember that exactly Lunar New Year, it doesn't stay on one day every year. It just moves around so much, and it's because it's calculated according to the moon. And really, I think a lot of Asians really do have to rely on almanac or something to actually tell them. For example, other major festivals is the Moon Festival, which is the harvest festival, which is kind of the equivalent of Thanksgiving. So that's when families gather, they all, celebrate the harvest, right? And so it's a lot of these things. And there's a huge summer festival, which is when everybody actually rows boats, which is the Dragon Boat Festival. So these are all actually marked in the almanac, because actually that was one of the most basic things that I was referring to all the time, to know, oh, when is this next festival, so that I can call my mother and call my parents and wish them happy holidays, happy festival.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one day that traditionally, within the next 24-hour period, that everybody would be joining together, looking through the almanac, trying to figure out what to do and not do, and how they should protect themselves against the bad stuff.
Is it based on Chinese time or New York English?
Very interesting question. Thank you. It is based on my Geomancer's time, which is absolutely 100% Chinese time.
Okay.
So I did have a whole discussion with him not long ago, because we were talking about, how do these calculations come about, and how does it affect New York, for example?
You just got to look a day earlier in the book.
Right, because it's a day earlier, day after. But then he said, remember one thing, he said, and that's really true. The whole world is connected now. Everything is global. And it's indeed the case, because when he was talking about find a place to hide, okay, whatever you call it about the pandemic, you find a place to hide, but then you realize that the virus had already, jumped to so many other different places.
Mhm.
And so then it became a global find a place to hide. And and he just said something very, very prescient, which is we are now all globally connected. And he clearly also sometimes would give people investment tips. And he would also say, we are all globally connected in the way that, even when you're talking about financial crisis or financial advances that people can make, it is all completely interrelated.
Well, speaking of the pandemic, we've all sort of staggered through the last year, and most of us, I guess, have emerged on the other side. But let's move on to this year, 2021. What can we expect from the year of the metal ox?
It will be better than 2020.
Okay, the bar is low,
Right.
granted.
It would be better. Actually, we were actually interviewed a while ago, and it was actually written up in the New York Times. So you can go back to that. The guy said, our geomancer said, cash is king. Make sure that you are self-reliant. And the other one is that to say that COVID is not over. Okay, I think it's quite clear that COVID is not over. So he said that the level of diligence and carefulness of dealing with COVID should be applied to everything else that we do. Now, I think it's okay to be careful. I love being careful. I'm not a careless person. So I will just always double check everything, cross every T, dot every I to make sure that everything is done as well as it can be.
And it's been another interesting period because one of the things that we did an event with him. He's been very reclusive in the past few years, but 4 or 5 years ago, we did an event in Hong Kong where he came out and answered questions from the public. And someone asked him, so is next year a good year or a bad year? And he just stayed there for a second saying, well, good or bad for what? I mean, the question was like, open the book, every day. It's good and bad for something. And the whole idea, it's not, is such and such. You can't isolate it in a way. You have to look at trends. And you can see next week is a period. And it's basically a glorified weather prediction, with metaphysical characteristics. You can see that you have a week of period where it's great to go out in public. It's great to meet friends. It's great to be planting if you need to, and they separate things like that. What we've had in the past year, we had a chat with Joanna, and he said, well, yeah, it's been bad for everything's been canceled, but have you stayed home? Have you taken care of yourself? Are you in better shape now physically than you were a year ago? Have you gotten sick? Have you been able to take care of yourself in a different way? And if you can maximize what is there on your plate rather than trying to do something that you cannot do or would be difficult, then that is the way to harness the right amount of energy. So basically my interpretation of that is that I wanted to be out. I wanted to be out on my boat. And this has been an entire year that I needed to be home and repair my fishing net.
Last year, we had the pandemic. It was also a pretty turbulent year, certainly in this country in terms of politics, a very polarizing period that is still with us. Is there any notion that 2021 will bring us a bit more global harmony?
He said that he can't see, or he cannot foresee, or he will not predict actually wars, which is lucky. I think one thing we were so worried about even in 2020 is that, war in a large scale would really have done us in. But he did say that he see that there would be some regional strife. It's wonderful. I love guys who are cryptic. He is absolutely cryptic. That's all he said.
One of the great lines he had was that for a metal rat, the metal is not very strong, meaning armaments.
The metal ox for a metal ox.
Sorry, yeah. We don't have to worry about swords and weaponry so much. But strife will still be there.
What about in terms of leadership? Obviously, there's been a bit of a transition here in this country this year. Any notion of that? Any sort of changing of the guard sort of type of thing?
He said that actually the year of the metal ox it's an interesting year in which we can kind of rely on what shall I call it? Rely on an elder authority that will take care of us.
Bernie Sanders?
A very good thing. Huh?
Bernie Sanders?
No. I thought Biden is elderly enough, no?
True. Well, you're setting a high bar there, but absolutely. No, that definitely works. Well, I think we should open it up to see if anyone who's with us might have any questions to ask of Ken and Joanna. We have one from Mira. Why is it metal ox?
Okay. Chinese has 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Okay. Now, the Chinese as in year, as in the big Chinese yearly cycle or annual, actual cycles is 60 years, which is actually least common multiple of 10 and 12.
Well, basically, once you work through the 5 elements and the 12 zodiac animals, you've reached 60.
You've reached 60.
Your full life cycle.
So the full life cycle is 60, and this is metal, as in the heavenly metal. So these 5 elements we're talking about are what they call heavenly elements, and then we have the earthly elements, which is actually all of our animals, which actually starts off with rat, and then ox and tiger, and then it goes on. So it's actually the matching of these two that you get metal and ox. Got it?
Got it? Think so.
So is there ever just a year of the ox without a, right, so it's always a something
yeah.
ox.
Okay, another thing is I want to explain about the goodie bag. John, were there 2 oranges?
Yes.
Good. So there's always, again, belief systems in that double things coming together has to be double happiness, double this, double that. And that's actually the good luck of it. Okay, so you don't go for the, odd numbers. Okay.
How come I only got 1 beer? Sorry.
That's a good question.
Well, I don't know who just gave you 1 beer. I don't know. Maybe other people had more beer. So that's
It has 14
important.
sips in it.
Yeah, but then also I know that in the wonderful iHouse goodie bag, there are also gold coins or chocolate covered, gold, what do you call it? Chocolate coins, but covered in gold. Okay, these gold coins are actually wonderful Hanukkah gelt, and Ken will tell you the story why the Chinese or the Asians love having Hanukkah gelt.
Well, basically the menorah is not a great part of Chinese culture, I should say, but the idea of having the gold, anything that involves gold, and anything also that involves sweetness, it's just 2 of the great things that you're supposed to do coming together. And the Hanukkah gelt, which actually was a part that came in with the diaspora and Chinese who were going abroad and coming back and through trade, they encountered that, and it just hit exactly what they needed at that time.
Yeah, so chocolates and sweets are very, very major, very important. And I hope everybody already is, well, I saw that wonderful, making of spring rolls, which is, again, festive. and the reason is that for the Asians, I mean, nothing as important as everybody sitting around and eating a lot, eating so much that you basically are bursting, right? And also you have to think of all the types of foods that are actually auspicious to eat. And actually, you know what? Didn't we have a whole slideshow?
We do have some pictures.
Well, we'll just so quickly show some slides. Why not?
I literally thought that the Hanukkah gelt was just this incredible iHouse cross-cultural, we're taking Lunar New Year. But I actually think it's probably wonderful. It's a great way to repurpose excess Hanukkah gelt. Months later, you can sell it for Lunar New Year.
It's exceeded only by the time that the year of the rabbit actually comes into Easter.
It's like literally whoever thought of this, like to take the excess Hanukkah gelt and sell it, for Lunar New Year is brilliant.
Perfect.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
So this is just very simple to tell you that this is good fortune, the wonderful word, good fortune. And you will see that on one side, well, actually on the left side of the screen, it is what I would call the standard right side up. But then on the right side, it is actually upside down. And the people actually decorate their homes with the upside down fortune.
It's on purpose that it's upside down.
It's not because Ken Smith couldn't read Chinese.
No.
It's upside down because that actually means that the fortune arrives. Because the word Dao, upside down, actually happens to sound like arrival. And so it means fortune arrives. And so this is kind of a nice little thing to talk about and to mention because it just looks sort of a little bit strange, but it is really upside down. And then second slide, please, which is about more food.
Now, everybody should have one of these. This is
head and tail.
And it should be actually with head and tail. That was a little bit hard for me, when I went back to the Midwest. It was a little hard to find, but you want completeness. You want the whole thing, but you don't want to be chopping stuff off, and you want it to start, literally from head to tail.
I
And
So
think I
this-
saw that walking down by the Hudson River today.
did it have the ginger and the coriander already cut off, or? Okay,
Yeah, not quite as festive.
okay.
Okay, the next slide is another auspicious food that people tend to have, which is noodles. Noodles is the symbolism, the most symbolic of longevity. And so you clearly want to talk about everything that is lively and about life and about living. And so noodles is a very important food.
And do not cut the noodles. Then you want the noodles as long as possible.
Okay, next one is an interesting one. We wanted to juxtapose the Korean tradition and the Chinese tradition of dumplings. The Korean rice cakes is on the left side, and then the standard Chinese dumplings, which happens to be here, are the fried pot stickers,
No.
is on the right side.
Why? What do these symbolize? Well, if you step back for a second, if you go to the next slide, they look like coins.
So the Korean rice cakes, which is called the dokguk, which is actually rice cake soup, which people always eat for the first day of Lunar New Year, because it symbolizes that they have actually grown a year older, that they are actually, what should I call it, having conquered that past year and is now moving forward. So that's actually one. And also the other thing is that they do look like coins.
And as far as the dumplings are concerned, if we go to the next slide, you'll see that they look like gold.
Look like gold nuggets or gold ingots, because the Chinese style of gold ingots look like that. So the dumplings is as if you're eating, you're eating all the good luck and prosperity. How about that?
And so
Wow.
yes, John?
Well, I was just going to say, those dumplings don't look anywhere near as good as the ones that Joanna produces faithfully and in abundance every Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
It's the sort of situation where and it must be terrible for you guys. I know it's terrible for me, but usually the people are coming in and out. There are dumplings to be had. The doormen, the staff in the building are always very well aware of this and always anticipate their dumplings, which go up and down.
I will say that the production line will be significantly shorter tomorrow once it starts.
I have been allowed to crimp in years past. There's some talent for that anyway.
And so we've dealt with, beginnings, we've dealt with longevity with the noodles, we have prosperity clearly with golden coins. And there's one other thing that is also very much a part of Chinese food. And if we see the next slide.
Well, of all Asian foods,
Well, yes.
is the importance of fruits. Fruits
And-
are sweet, fruits are nutritious, and also think of the climates. I mean, it's not just East Asia, but also Southeast Asia, that variety of fruits that we can get.
But also it's not, and also not just the fruits, but things that are round. You want something that is actually symbolizing continuity and community, and which is why we also have the little rice dumplings in the bowl right there. But another crucial thing about continuity and community is that the fruits must have stems, because that proves that they're connected to something, or we're connected to something. You still have all of that as part of the feeling.
Good. And so we will just end with two other huge spreads. I hope nobody's too hungry. Can we go to the next slide? It is my favorite thing. This is a Vietnamese Tet, banquet. You can see, there are spring rolls in there, there are rice, there are rice cakes. I mean, you just name it. I mean, it is just so wonderful. And also it is so important because it is really the New Year's Eve meal, which is what Ken and I will be having very soon because I have to cook. The New Year's Eve meal is really the rounding out of the old year. So it's sort of like, taking the report card of whatever we've done and just rounding out, completing that old year, and then basically preparing for the next year. So it is really important that these meals, the New Year's Eve meal as well as New Year's Day meal, are like really, really key. And I hope that all of you are actually having a good meal of some sort and have the Tsingtao beer and have some nice candies, oranges, and chocolates to go with it. Now, the next slide after that is the Korean Lunar New Year meal. And you can see, interestingly enough, the Koreans also have their own belief system. You remember just now I was saying that the Chinese say, oh no, it's 2 or 6 or 8. And I think that even the candies and so on are following that same number that you're getting in your goodie bag. But then the Koreans, for their fruits, it's 3. You see that? And interestingly, for the Vietnamese, for their Tet, for their New Year tradition, it is always 5 different types of fruits in a huge display. So we have and we see that, you know, it's not just one culture, it's actually many cultures. There are things that are very similar, and then there are things that are quite different. And that's the end of our, you know, mouth-watering slideshow. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Does anyone have any further questions? Type them in, speak up, ask.
So what was the name, the
Geomancer.
Okay,
how do you spell that? Is it an English word or
Yes.
a Chinese word?
It is an English word, and we're typing it in right now.
yes.
Geomancer.
And I would love this, because how did we meet our Geomancer? He's a very good friend of the original publisher of the big book, but he actually, I think in life we have to be very lucky and thankful. This guy, our Geomancer Warwick Wong, is actually a retired architect who built the Hong Kong subway stations.
Oh.
He
Wow.
was a descendant of a family of geomancers. So his grandfather was a geomancer that, you know, practiced and made money and give people all the feng shui readings and all that. But by the time when Warwick grew up in Hong Kong in the 1950s and 60s, he was a, you know, good, you know, British trained boy, and he went to the university, he studied architecture, he became an architect. And then it was later in his life that he just wanted to be reunite, or well, to reconnect with that family tradition that he knew he had. And so he went back and studied it.
And a large part of that actually had to be an immersion into a traditional Chinese mathematics, which has really very little to do with you know, modern, particularly higher level math. So it was for him a long study of a tradition that really is now so highly specialized and only really practiced among geomancers. But before, it used to be architects. It was the standard math back then.
Okay. And sorry, one more question. So all these things from about the almanac, they apply to like Hong Kong and mainland, and just
Yes, yes. So in mainland China, basically, they are not supposed to have published books of almanacs, because that is considered feudal superstition even now.
Oh.
So they can't really have, I mean, I think there are scholarly studies of the I Ching and all that, which is kind of predictions and so on. But the thing is, as in the everyday almanac, no. So what happened is that then it started ending up in all sorts of online websites. So people can type in whatever day it is and see whether it is good for weddings or not.
Yes.
Now, then comes different geomancers and different readings. So then you have maybe people, one guy said that this Saturday is good for a wedding, and then some other guy said absolutely do not have a wedding. So how do you sort of reconcile that? And that's the fun part, because I had a Beijing wonderful couple that we knew, and they were trying to pick a date for their weddings. And for their wedding, and they could not decide. And so they called me up and said, could you please just go to your Hong Kong guy and just get me the date? And so we did. So yes, we have been kind of consultants for that.
There are several different editions of this, as we said, in Hong Kong, and we've done cross references among them, you know, from various times, and there is a remarkable connection between them. And we talked to, you know, one of the publishers and said, well, what is it, you know, about this? Is, well, most of the times when you find a variance, that comes from the editor. It's not actually from the geomancer. It'll be, well, we've run out of space and we're not going to include this, or, you know, something else that comes up, or they'll have an editorial idea that if the calendars don't add up necessarily in terms of comparison between the traditional Chinese reading and the Western reading, they will tilt toward the Western reading just because their readers use the Gregorian calendar for all practical purposes. And so there's sometimes things will get confused or murky. And we're in a situation this year where just that kind of situation occurred.
I mean, the reason why 2020 and 2021 had been whatever you call it, it's still a little bit murky. And our Geomancer Warwick did say, I mean, he's just still seeing that things are not clear. And I think you agree that, yeah, a lot of that is happening around here now, around the world. Things are not clear. And so he kept on saying, just stay positive, stay calm. And another really funny part, and he said, don't read too much news.
Now, a few years ago, he phrased that entirely differently, because he'd say that, when you live in a modern, scientific, data-oriented culture, you're looking at a watch and you're saying, 1201, is it good or bad? And when this document was made, the spirit of this document is you look up at the sun. You don't look at your watch, you look at the sun, and is the sun shining, and where is the sun? And that is an entirely different approach to this situation. And so his idea is, it's not day, hour, it's, week, month, and don't pay attention to, now he would say, don't pay attention to the news cycle. Back then he would say, stop looking at your watch all the time.
Joanna and Ken, I mean, thanks for taking the time. I'm fascinated about how the almanac could be used to build relationships. In a very hypothetical scenario that, one of in a couple, there's an angel and the other one is really, really difficult to get on with. How would you use the almanac to kind of build your daily interactions?
Okay, well, first of all, we use the almanac. Do we use that for that? We use it for a lot of what we call social occasions.
We have to,
and I think that's important, because social occasions is actually when people bond. And there is a lot to do with community. And I think it's wonderful that, this is the first ever time I'm speaking to iHouse residents and also to alumni as a speaker. It is so cool. I love this community. I mean, the idea is that there are times when you actually want to reach out and to be with a lot of people. And there are times when you actually should be alone, or you really, I go take a walk myself in the park. Ken Smith stays at home because I don't want to talk to him, which is absolutely fine.
And the thing about that is that the almanac actually gives you an excuse, in a way, that say, well, no, I don't want to talk to you. Or, bad day to talk to you. I mean, and you can interpret that however you want to talk about. And you can see a good day, and you can harness your energy, whether you have it or not at the moment. You can actually summon the energy to say, well, now we're going to do this. And in a way, I mean, that's sort of, that, I would say that's one of the single most efficient ways that people really do use that in modern life. And it comes down to, well, nope, can't sign a contract. Can't sign a contract tomorrow.
Oh, it's great, because I have used that. Oh, no, I'm not going to sign a contract today. I'm going to wait until whatever day it is. And then the people get so scared, they offered me more money.
Well, and that is not necessarily just a Chinese thing, by the way, because years and years ago, I'd worked with the photographer for REM, the rock band, and she was in there, and they were negotiating the contract for the art design, and she just said, no, I can't possibly sign a contract when Mercury's in retrograde. And the attorneys just said, give this woman whatever she wants, get her out of our office. So yes, that is a transferable cultural phenomenon.
But I can tell you, the signing contracts and building houses, I mean, we have, you can imagine the amount of real estate moguls and people who really, really believe and follow that. And they do. Because after all, you really want to, and I think in life we all want to, have the best foot, for whatever the best beginning. And tomorrow is the beginning of the year of the ox. So I want those iHouse residents with oranges and so on, eat your oranges and think of it this way, because that is actually a very good symbol for of course it's good vitamin C, but it really is a very good symbol for the gold and for the brightness that this new year brings. Okay, the sweetness of the candies, there's a reason for that. It's the idea of the sweetness that you will bring in for this upcoming year in your life. I mean, all the, and I don't know about the Tsingtao beer. What do you want to say about the Tsingtao beer?
Okay, the Qingdao beer. We're a little bit pressed there because that was absolutely a German import because of the German population in Qingdao, in the actual port city. But I have to say the Chinese have taken it to heart in terms of sales, an immense adaptation there, adoption. But also, Qingdao is probably the single biggest international brand that has come out of China of any item. So that has to go with it.
Well, yeah, drink some wine. It's good. Drink some wine.
And if anyone has ever had Baijiu, Maotai, or any of the, you can understand exactly why we have beer.
Tsingtao beer is fine. It's very good for iHouse residents, and I think it's great.
Ken, where in Ohio are you from?
I grew up outside of about 30 miles north of Columbus.
Okay. We lived in Ohio for a few years between Akron and Cleveland. So I was just wondering if it was anywhere in that.
Okay. No. I grew up in Marion, which was the home of Warren G. Harding, a former president of the U.S. 100 years ago.
Okay. Warren G. Harding. Okay, good.
Okay. Johnny,
this was so interesting.
Good. Johnny, any other questions?
John, you're muted.
Yeah, but I think we are winding down. I think not. We are wrapped up here. We've had some great questions, a wonderful presentation by Joanna and Ken. Great. The person who was responsible for the goodie bags and putting this all together technically is Ciasia Brown. Thank you so much, Ciasia. Terrific job. Thanks everybody for joining. We will be festive tonight and tomorrow. We'll all have a great new year, and hopefully a year from now we can all come back and celebrate at iHouse together.
We're going to hold you to these predictions. We're going to.
Yes, and this is a New Year banner, and it says the whole family safe and at peace. That's what we want. Okay.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And
God
happy New
bless
Year.
outside.
Okay. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Johnny.
Thank you, Ciasia.
Yes.
Thanks, Ciasia.
Bye.
Happy to help. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Happy New Year.